I didn't come here to start over. I came here to end it. The desert wind was not warm that evening. It was dry, razor-edged, and bitter. Elias Nez stood at the edge of the crumbling porch, watching the last shred of sun disappear beneath the blood-orange horizon. The heat was still rising off the rocks like ghosts refusing to die. His boots sank into the sand as he stepped down, rifle slung across his back, relic in his pocket, and nothing else tying him to the world behind him. The cabin, if you could even call it that, looked like it had fought one too many dust storms and surrendered. The adobe walls were cracked like dried skin, the roof sagged under its own tired weight, and the front door hung from one hinge like a drunk who'd missed the right saloon. But Elias didn't flinch. The place was exactly what he needed, broken, forgotten, and far away from anyone who might ask him to keep breathing. He threw his pack down inside and lit a small oil lamp, its flicker casting nervous shadows on the warped floorboards. A canteen. Some dried meat. A near-empty bottle of juniper mezcal. And in his coat pocket the silver relic of Sahonia, his wife, etched with her initials and the faint outline of a blue corn blossom. He held it in his palm, staring at it for a moment too long. His fingers clenched. Then he whispered into the thick silence, "I didn't come here to start over. I came here to end it." 6 months. That's how long it had been since Sahonia's fever took her to their small Pueblo house in Tuba City. 6 months since he buried her with calloused hands that didn't shake because they were already numb. 6 months since he felt any kind of warmth that wasn't born from the sun or the bottom of a bottle. He'd sold the house, burned her letters, gave away the dog, then rode into the belly of nowhere deeper than any map cared to follow. No neighbors, no law, no memory. Only the sound of wind and silence is heavy enough to make your soul ache louder than your heartbeat. Night fell fast, like it always did in the high desert. Elias laid his blanket on the floor, not bothering to clean. Dust didn't bother the dead. He sipped mezcal straight from the bottle, the burn of familiar pain, and let his mind drift dangerously close to memories he didn't want. Sahonia's laugh, the way her hair curled when it rained, the sound she made when the fever hit her lungs. No more. This place wasn't for remembering. It was for forgetting, for vanishing. He was halfway through the last swallow when it happened. A sound. Faint, wet, insistent. A sound that should not exist in a place like this. He froze. It wasn't windy. It wasn't a coyote. It wasn't a rattlesnake. It was a baby. Crying. Elias blinked. His mind ran circles around itself. Impossible. The cabin was abandoned. He had made sure. Bought it from a man who hadn't touched it in 15 years. There wasn't a soul within 20 miles. Hell, even the vultures hadn't circled him yet. But there it was again, closer now. Muffled, fragile. A baby's cry too new for this old world. He grabbed the rifle, stood up slowly. The oil lamp in his hand cast long shadows that twitched like nervous animals. "Ain't nobody here but me," he muttered, throat dry. So who the hell brought life into a place meant for dying? He moved toward the back room, the cry growing louder with each creaking step. The door was slightly ajar. Dust curled through the crack like a held breath. He pushed it open. There, huddled in the corner beneath a pile of old blankets, was a shape. No two shapes. A woman, large-bodied, hair disheveled, skin, sunburnt cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. Her arms wrapped protectively around a newborn who squirmed and wailed against her chest. Her eyes, wide, wild, animal-like, locked on his, full of terror and fury, and something else, desperation. Elias didn't lower the rifle at first. Not out of fear, out of confusion. Out of the brutal math in his head that just stopped adding up. She's not supposed to be here. No one is. But she didn't beg. She didn't move. Just pressed the baby tighter like her body might be the last fortress she had. Then hoarse and cracked, he said the first words he'd spoken aloud in days, "I won't hurt you." It came out wrong, rusted, unearned. Still, she didn't answer, didn't blink, just held on tighter. Elias set the lamp down, stepped back, and left the door open behind him. He sat at the cabin's threshold, staring out into the endless dark. The silence returned, but it was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't heavy. It was listening. And Elias, he didn't know what the hell to do. What was she doing here? How long had she been inside? How had he not seen signs, tracks of fire, a bag? Was she hiding when he arrived? Why this place and that baby? Why now? His hand drifted to the relic in his pocket. But this time he didn't open it. Instead, he whispered to no one. This wasn't the deal. I came here to die. Alone. Eventually, the baby stopped crying. A deeper silence fell over the cabin, the kind that comes only after breathless chaos. Elias stayed seated, unmoving, long into the night. When dawn's first light cracked through the broken windows, he turned his head and said softly, but loud enough to be heard, "Be gone by morning." He didn't wait for an answer. But just as he stood to gather his things and ride off into the morning sun, a voice broke the silence behind him. Not angry, not pleading, just tired and true. "We have nowhere else to go," and Elias frozen. And for the first time in months, he didn't know what to do next. Elias didn't turn around right away. The voice hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, soft, rasped, too heavy to ignore. "We have nowhere else to go." It wasn't a cry. It wasn't even a plea. It was a fact. And facts had a way of cutting through him more deeply than emotion ever could. He exhaled through his nose, jaw clenched so tightly it ached. The desert sun was bleeding into the room, drawing long streaks of light across the dirt floor. He stood still, staring at the open land outside as if it might offer an escape hatch. It didn't. With a sigh that felt older than his bones, he turned back toward the room. She hadn't moved. Still curled around the baby, her dark eyes locked on him, not hopeful, not grateful, just bracing for whatever came next. He stepped closer. Not too close, just enough to see clearly. She was bigger than most women he'd known. Broad-shouldered, round-faced, with arms thick from labor, not luxury. Her cheeks were flushed from the heat, but her gaze held its own fire, exhausted, sure, but still burning. The baby stirred in her arms, gave a whimper that barely escaped its tiny lips. Elias cleared his throat. "You've been here a long time." A pause. Then she nodded once. He glanced around at the dusty floor, the untouched hearth, the broken window that hadn't been covered. No fire, no footprints, no light. "I hid," she said. "When I heard the horse." Her voice was lower this time, steadier. It had the worn-down edge of someone who'd run out of fear but hadn't yet found rest. He looked at the bundle in her arms again. "How old? 2 weeks." Elias blinked. 2 weeks. Out here. He almost asked how that was even possible. How she delivered, how she fed the child. How she hadn't collapsed from heat stroke or infection. But the answers didn't matter as much as the reality. She had done it. He rubbed the back of his neck. You could have died. She nodded again. I almost did. A beat of silence. Then he gestured toward the kitchen. I got beans, dried meat, hard bread. He hesitated. Are you hungry? She didn't answer, but her body betrayed her. Her arms tensed as if trying to shield the baby from the very word food, as though hunger was an enemy that might rip the child away. He turned on his heel and left the room muttering under his breath. By the time he returned, he'd placed a cracked plate on the ground, some beans, 2 hard tortillas, and a strip of jerky. Not much, but something. She reached for it slowly, then paused. I didn't mean to trespass. Elias shrugged. I didn't mean to find anyone breathing in this place. There shouldn't be life in a place meant for dying, he added quietly, more to himself than her. She didn't respond, just took the plate and began eating slow and careful, like each bite had to earn its place in her belly. Elias turned and walked outside. The sun was cruel this time of year, even before noon. He sat on a stump near the edge of the porch and watched the heat blur the horizon. There had been a plan, a simple, quiet one. Ride out to the edge of nowhere, let time do what the fever had done to Sahonia. No mess, no fuss, just stillness. Now there was a woman inside, a baby too. Breathing, needing. Elias hated how quickly those words stirred something inside him. He looked down at the relic in his pocket, but didn't take it out. Not yet. The door creaked behind him. I'm Maria, she said. Her voice was hoarse but stronger now. He didn't look at her, just nodded. Elias. A long silence stretched between them. Then she added, That's Nali. He glanced at the baby. She was sleeping now, one small fist curled near her face. You got people. Maria shook her head. Not anymore. He raised an eyebrow. My parents threw me out when they found out I was pregnant. Said I brought shame. Her lips pressed thin. The baby's father promised he'd come back. He didn't. Elias said nothing. There was nothing worth saying. I used to work at the textile coop near Crown Point, she went on, almost like she had to say it out loud to prove she'd mattered somewhere. They said a woman like me, she gestured to herself. To her size, her situation was bad for business. Elias scratched his beard. The cabin was abandoned, she said. I didn't think anyone would come. They usually don't, he replied. Maria's eyes drifted to the desert. I wasn't trying to steal. He nodded. You were surviving. She looked surprised, maybe even grateful, but she didn't smile. You can rest, he said. For now. She looked down at the baby. I won't stay forever. I don't expect you to. He rose from the stump. I'll check the well. You need water. Then he walked away, leaving her in the doorway, holding the only thing she had left in the world. That night, the cabin wasn't as quiet. The baby stirred twice. Once Elias heard Maria humming a slow, low melody that reminded him of something his mother used to sing long before the wars and the silence. He didn't sleep much. Instead, he lay on the floor, eyes open, watching the slivers of moonlight shift on the ceiling. By dawn, he knew something had shifted. Not in her, not in the baby, in him. In the days ahead, he'd try to tell himself they were temporary, that they would leave soon and he could return to the plan, to the silence, to forget. But deep down, something already knew they weren't leaving. and neither was he. The next morning, Maria stood in the doorway holding Nolly, her hair pulled back, her expression calmer than before. She didn't ask permission. She simply said, "I'll cook breakfast if that's all right." Elias blinked, and for the first time in a long time, he nodded. Maria moved through the kitchen like someone expecting to be chased out at any moment. Her steps were quiet, deliberate, as if every creak of the floorboards might set off a trap. But she cooked like she had muscle memory for it, measured scoops of masa hands moving in wide, practiced circles, patting dough into tortillas. The smell hit Elias like a memory he hadn't asked for. Not just food, home. He sat outside on the porch, arms resting on his knees, eyes half-lidded against the glare. Inside, the baby cooed softly from a drawer lined with blankets and her makeshift cradle. A wind stirred hot and dry, brushing past him like an old regret. Maria stepped into the doorway, holding out a plate, one warm tortilla, folded over beans, and a hint of chile. Her eyes didn't meet his. "I found some in your stores. I hope you don't mind." Elias took the plate. "If I did, I wouldn't be eating it." He took a bite, chewed slowly. The tortilla was imperfect, uneven, but real, satisfying. They ate in silence, side by side, on opposite ends of the porch. The only sound was the crackle of wind and the faint grumble of Nolly's breathing. After a while, Maria cleared her throat. "I used to make 100 of those a day. For the co-op kitchen." Elias didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You cook like someone who knows what hunger feels like." She looked down at her hands. "Every day." "The desert didn't spit me out," she murmured. "It swallowed me. But I'm still fighting to stand." That sentence stuck in the air, sharp-edged and painful. Elias didn't look at her, but something in his jaw twitched. They finished the food. She stood, took the plate back in, and when she returned, her shoulders were just a little less tense. That afternoon, he patched the back door while Maria gathered laundry to wash. She asked where the nearest stream was, and he told her about the arroyo 2 miles east. He didn't offer to help. She didn't ask. But when she came back, sunburned and sweating, clothes clutched to her chest, he had already filled a second bucket of water and left it by the cabin door. No one thanked anyone. That was the quiet agreement. You give what you can. You take what you must. Days passed in a rhythm they didn't talk about. Elias rose with the sun's split wood and repaired the fence post. Maria swept dust from corners no one had touched in years, humming lullabies that made Nolly sleep deeper than silence ever could. They didn't talk much, but they didn't avoid each other either. Their movements orbited around one another like two stars that hadn't decided if they'd collide or stay just out of reach. Sometimes at dusk, Maria would sit by the fire with Nolly in her lap, and Elias would linger longer outside, listening without watching. The baby's soft breathing, Maria's voice steady and low. He'd forgotten how that kind of peace sounded. One night, as the wind howled harder than usual, Elias lay staring at the ceiling, a blanket tucked tight under his arms. The mezcal was gone. He hadn't replaced it. He thought of the girl in the next room, woman really, and how she managed to survive alone in the desert, with nothing but stubbornness and the baby in her arms. He'd known soldiers who broke with less. It wasn't just her strength that unsettled him. It was how natural she looked here. Like this broken cabin and that child in her arms had somehow given her more purpose than anything before. And that terrified him. The next morning, the rhythm broke. He woke to find Maria crouched in the garden plot out back, sleeves rolled up, pulling weeds from dry, cracked soil. "You don't have to do that," he called out. She stood back, glistening with sweat. It looked sad. like no one ever tried. Elias walked toward her shovel in hand. So you figured you'd save it. Figure it's not that different from me, she replied, brushing dust off her palms. He paused. Then without saying more, drove the shovel into the soil beside her. They worked until the sun stood high. They didn't talk, but they moved in tandem, turning over earth-stacking stones along the edges, building something that didn't have a name yet. That evening after dinner, Maria sat on the porch steps holding Nali. The baby was restless, fists flailing, lips puckering with hunger. Maria rocked gently, whispering a lullaby in Dineh-Bizad's soft syllables that wrapped the night in comfort. Elias stood by the doorway, watching her silhouette against the dying light. The baby quieted. He didn't move. Maria turned her head slightly. I know we're not staying forever, she said. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The silence between them tightened. She looked down at the baby. We're just visitors in your quiet. Elias opened his mouth. I closed it. What could he say that he planned to die here, that every nail he hammered felt like nailing his own coffin until she arrived, that this cabin had been a tomb and now it was something else entirely. But he didn't know what. He stared into the desert. You didn't break anything, he muttered. This place was already cracked. Then he added, almost too low to hear, maybe it's better that way. Later that night, after they'd all gone quiet, Maria left a small piece of fry bread wrapped in a cloth near his door. She didn't say anything, didn't knock. But Elias saw it in the moonlight. He picked it up, held it for a long time before taking a bite. It was warm and tasted like belonging. The next morning, Elias rose early. He started boiling water for coffee before the sun had fully crested the ridge. He found himself listening for the sounds of movement from the back room. The shift of blankets, the creak of floorboards. When she emerged carrying Nali swaddled in her arms, her eyes widened. You made coffee. He nodded, handing her a chipped mug. Didn't know how to take it. She accepted it with both hands and smiled faintly. Hot. That's enough. They sat together under the low morning sky. Nali snored softly in Maria's arms. Elias cleared his throat. Have you ever built a coop, Maria Blink? For chickens. He nodded. Figure we'll need eggs soon. She studied him, cautious but curious. Are you planning to get chickens? Maybe, he said. If you're staying long enough to help build it. Her breath caught just slightly. Then, almost without meaning to, she smiled. I've built worse things with less. And with that, something unspoken passed between them. Not a promise, not a plan, but the first fragile shape of something new. Tomorrow they will find wood. Tomorrow they will measure. Tomorrow they will build. Not just a coop, but a reason to stay. The morning came with the breeze that didn't burn. It moved through the canyon like a whisper, stirring the desert brush and fluttering the edges of the patched curtain hanging in the cabin window. Inside, Nali babbled softly from her blanket nest, while Maria folded laundry that had been dried stiff in the sun. Outside, Elias hammered the last nail into the frame of a chicken coop that wasn't yet home to anything but stubborn hope. He straightened, wiped sweat from his brow, and looked over his shoulder. Maria stood in the doorway, baby on her hip, watching. Not bad, she said. He shrugged. Still needs a roof, we all do. They locked eyes for half a second longer than either expected. Then she shifted Nali in her arms as if to break the weight of it. She moved to set the baby in her cradle and returned with a small cloth bag of nails and a dented coffee tin full of feed scraps. Elias nodded toward the coop. We'll trade for hens next time I go to town. Do you trust people out there? I don't, he said flatly. But I trust chickens to lay when they're fed. Maria smiled faintly. Smart birds. By midday, they'd finished the coop, if not perfectly, then at least solid enough to stand up against the wind. Elias leaned against the doorframe, inspecting their work. Maria sat in the shade shoes off, massaging her ankles. I used to think building things was for other people, she said. He looked at her sideways. People who had blueprints, plans, a reason. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you got a reason now. She looked up at him. I see you with her, he said, nodding toward the cabin where Nolly slept. You built something that didn't even need nails. Maria blinked, unsure how to receive that. So she didn't. She just turned her face away so the wind could hide her eyes. She's building a home in the ruins I chose to die in, Elias muttered to himself later as he watched her hang clothes from the line. There was no poetry in his voice, only confusion wrapped in awe. He hadn't meant to say it aloud, but he didn't regret it either. That night, they sat outside under a sky smeared with stars. Nolly slept curled against Maria's chest, tiny fingers gripping the edge of her shirt. Elias poked at the fire, its crackling rhythm, the only thing between them for a while. You ever wonder what makes some people stay and others just disappear? Maria asked, staring into the flames. All the time. She looked at him. Do you think it's about strength? He shook his head. Strength doesn't mean much out here. Out here, it's about will. Some folks keep going because they don't know how to stop. Others stop because no one ever showed them they could go on. And you... He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I came here to stop. She nodded. But you didn't. He met her gaze. You showed up. Maria looked away quickly, lips pressed. Days passed. The coop was joined by a small herb patch. Then a clothesline stretched tighter. Then a second bucket appeared by the well. Little things. Quiet things. The kind of things only people planning to stay bother with. Elias never said it aloud, but his rhythm began to include her Nolly in subtle ways. He fetched extra firewood, repaired a broken shutter in the back room. I started waking up before the baby cried, started listening to her breathing through the wall. Maria never pushed, never presumed. But sometimes she left food out for him. Sometimes she folded his shirt when she washed her own. Sometimes she asked him questions that had nothing to do with survival. What was she like? It was late. Fire low. Nolly is asleep. The wind was soft, as if the desert itself had leaned in to listen. Elias stared at the flames. She was kind, fierce. Small hands, big laugh. She sang even when she was sick. Sang to the end. Maria didn't speak. She just reached forward and refilled his mug. After a while, he said, Sahonia was the only one who ever looked at me like I wasn't some broken thing. Maria didn't say, I'm not trying to replace her. She didn't say, she'd want you to live. She just said, then you were lucky. He nodded. So was she. One morning, Nolly cried before dawn, louder than usual. Elias bolted upright, already halfway to the room before he caught himself. Maria was already there, rocking her gently. You okay? He asked. She looked up, eyes tired but soft. She's teething, maybe. Or hungry, or just being human. He lingered in the doorway longer than he should have. Then he said, take the bed tonight. I'll sleep out here. She blinked. You don't have to do that. I know, he said. I want to. She didn't argue, just nodded and whispered, thank you. The next morning, Elias found himself humming. It wasn't a song he remembered, just a tune, unfinished, like everything around him. He chopped wood with more rhythm than need, checked the fence for breaks, though none had appeared. He fixed a squeaky hinge that hadn't bothered anyone. When Maria stepped outside holding Nolly against her chest, she tilted her head. You always whistle when you're working. He stopped, surprised. Didn't realize I was. She smirked. It's nice. He blinked at her, then said gruffly, don't get used to it. That evening, a shadow passed on the ridge above their land. Too far to see clearly, too quiet to be a threat, but enough to make Elias's gut tighten. He said nothing. But that night, he cleaned his rifle, just in case. The desert had given him a grave to climb into, but now it felt like a seedbed, and nothing scared him more than the thought of watching something grow, then losing it again. That night, as Maria and Nolly slept peacefully behind a closed door, Elias sat alone beside the cold fire pit. He took out the silver relic Sahonia's and turned it over in his hand. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared at it like it might whisper something back. But all it gave him was a reflection, his face tired and alive. The fire had long gone out, but Elias still sat there, his hands blackened with ash. The relic hung from his fingers, its silver dull in the starlight. He rubbed his thumb across the engraving, as though touch alone could bring back what was gone. The desert around him was silent, except for the slow drag of wind moving over the dry grass. The kind of silence that pressed against your chest until you could feel your own heartbeat echo inside it. He hadn't dreamed of Sahonia in months. But that night, sleep came like a thief and brought her with it. She was sitting by the old Pueblo window, sunlight spilling through her hair. Her hands, those small, gentle hands, were kneading dough on the counter. The smell of corn and smoke filled the air. When she turned toward him, her eyes were no longer soft brown. They were fever yellow, the same color they'd been the last day he saw her alive. Elias, she whispered. Her voice wasn't angry. It was a lament. He tried to speak but couldn't. Tried to reach her, but his body wouldn't move. She smiled faintly and said, You've built another life, haven't you? He opened his mouth, but the sound that came out was broken half word, half breath. She placed a hand over her heart, then over his. Don't let guilt build your walls. Then she turned into smoke. Elias jerked awake. The relic lay on the dirt beside him. The horizon had just started to bleed with morning. You can bury a person, he whispered, voice raw, but you can't bury their shadow. He stayed there until the sun climbed high, its heat washing the last of the dream from his skin. Inside, Maria was already awake, stirring a pot of beans. Nolly gurgled on the floor beside her, chewing the ear of a cloth rabbit Maria had sewn from scraps. You didn't sleep, Maria said without turning. Didn't need to. She eyed him for a moment, then went back to stirring. The soil's ready for planting, she said, if you still want to. He nodded absently, though his mind was elsewhere. You okay? She asked. Fine. You sure? Elias didn't answer. He walked outside, boots crunching the gravel. The truth was, he wasn't fine. He'd come here to be alone with ghosts. Now he was afraid they might start talking back. By midday, he was in the garden. The air shimmered with heat, making the horizon look like it was melting. Maria knelt beside him, showing him how deep to press the seeds. She worked quietly, methodically, as if she'd done this her whole life. "You've got patience," he said. She smiled without looking up. "No. I've got a baby. That's different." He chuckled despite himself. The sound startled him. It had been so long since laughter didn't taste bitter. Maria paused and leaned back on her heels. "Have you ever thought about leaving once?" "And I did." She looked at him, brow furrowed. He gestured toward the desert. "I left everything that mattered. Though if I came far enough, I'd leave the pain behind too." "Did it work?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They planted in silence until dusk. The smell of earth clung to their hands, to their clothes, to the air itself. That night, Maria sang softly to Nali as the baby fought to sleep. Elias sat by the window, staring out at the pale blue of the coming night. The melody was familiar somehow, one of those songs without a name, older than language. When Nali finally drifted off, Maria stayed in the doorway, half in light, half in shadow. Have you ever thought of her? Elias's hand froze over the relic in his pocket. "Every day." "I figured." "She's the reason I came here," he said. I thought if I could find the quiet she loved, I could die where she wanted to live." Maria nodded slowly. "And now—" He looked at her, the firelight carving lines across his face. "Now I don't know what the hell I'm doing." She took a step closer. "You're living." He almost smiled. "Feels like sin sometimes." "Maybe that's what living is," she said softly. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile, alive. Like the moment before a rainstorm, waiting for the first drop to fall. That night the wind rose. The desert screamed. The roof moaned like a wounded beast. Nali started crying, the kind of sharp, panicked cry that tore through walls. Elias was up before Maria reached the cradle. He scooped the baby up, rocking her in awkward arms, whispering nothing in particular. Just sound. Just motion. Maria watched him, astonished. When Nali quieted, Elias looked down at the child in his arms. Her tiny hand grasped his finger with an impossible strength. He froze. His throat tightened. Maria saw the grief flicker in his eyes, the memory of another pair of small hands that would never hold him again. He placed Nali gently back into her mother's arms. "She's strong." Maria nodded. "Take after her mama." Elias smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. For the next few days, something between them changed. Subtle things. He stopped calling her you, started using her name, started asking about her past, her people, the things she missed. In return, Maria stopped apologizing for her presence. She started humming while she cooked, even teasing him when he burned his hand on the kettle. It wasn't friendship, not yet. But it wasn't loneliness anymore either. One evening, as the sun sank into a storm of red dust, Elias stood outside watching lightning crawl across the far hills. Maria joined him, Nali sleeping against her shoulder. "You think the rain will reach us?" she asked. "Probably not," he said, "but I like watching it try." They stood side by side, the wind tugging at their clothes, the smell of ozone sharp in the air. When the first drops finally hit fat and rare, Maria laughed, really laughed, and Elias turned, startled by the sound. It was a laugh so alive it hurt to hear. He realized with a pang that felt like guilt and gratitude mixed that he hadn't thought of dying all week. That night he dreamed again, not of Sahonia this time, of Maria's laugh echoing through the cabin, mingled with the storm. When he woke, the sound still clung to the walls. He sat up, breathed unsteady, and whispered, "What are you doing to me?" The wind didn't answer. The next morning, Maria stepped outside with her hair still damp from washing. Nolly giggled in her arms as sunlight caught her face. Elias looked up from repairing a fence post, and for the first time in what felt like forever, something warm flickered in his chest. Maria laughed again, light and unguarded, and he thought, if a laugh can bloom here, maybe I'm not as dead as I thought. The laughter still lingered in the air, like dust that hadn't quite settled. Elias stood with one hand on the fence post, watching Maria twirl Nolly in her arms under the soft morning light. The baby's giggles bounced off the cabin walls louder than any bird call, more alive than anything the desert had offered him in years. He found himself smiling again, unguarded, real. It scared him. He turned back to the post, adjusting the wire, forcing his mind to stay with the task. But it didn't. It kept drifting. To her. To the baby. To the sudden weight of something good forming where he'd only expected silence. The wind picked up slightly. Warm but uneasy. Later inside the cabin, Maria stirred beans over the fire while Nolly gnawed on a scrap of tortilla. Elias watched them from the table, calloused hands resting over the relic still tucked in his pocket. He hadn't touched it in days, not since the dream, not since the storm. "Do you ever get tired of pretending you're not happy?" Maria asked suddenly. He blinked. "What makes you think I'm pretending?" She smirked. "Because you never let yourself sit still in it." He looked away. "Sometimes peace feels like a trap," he said. "Like the moment I trust it, it'll vanish." Maria turned back to the pot, but her voice stayed soft. "Not everything good leaves Elias." "You sure?" She paused, then nodded. "No, but I believe it." He stood up and stepped outside. The wind had shifted again. It carried something sour this time, faint but sharp. Smoke, but not from their fire. He narrowed his eyes toward the east. By mid-afternoon, the smell grew stronger. Acrid. Wrong. Elias walked the ridgeline, a lone rifle slung over his shoulder. The land was cracked, empty, same as always, but the air didn't lie. And then he saw it. In the far distance, a dark smear on the horizon. Not natural. Not a dust devil. Smoke from something larger than a campfire. Too steady to be wild. Someone else was out there. He returned to the cabin, jaw tight. "Pack a small bag," he said quietly. "Just in case." Maria looked up from her stitching. "What's wrong could be nothing, but I'd rather be ready." She didn't argue, just nodded and moved fast. Elias watched her gather things quietly, quickly, and practiced. She didn't panic. She didn't freeze. Just held Nolly a little closer and made sure the essentials were in reach. "You think it's trouble?" she asked. "I think we're not alone out here anymore." That evening, they didn't light a fire. They ate cold beans and stale bread in silence. Nolly was restless, picking up on the tension, like animals do when a storm's near. When night fell, Elias sat with his back to the door rifle across his lap. Maria lay with Nolly on the floor, a blanket draped over them both. She didn't sleep much. Neither did he. Around midnight, a coyote howled closer than usual. Elias gripped the rifle tighter. The next day, tracks appeared. Hoofprints in the sand no more than half a mile from the coop. Deep, fresh-headed north. Whoever made them didn't try to hide. That told Elias everything he needed to know. He followed them for a short distance, far enough to confirm what he feared they were circling. Whoever was out there knew the cabin existed. He returned quickly. "We need to be ready to move." Maria didn't ask questions. She just tightened the sling holding Nolly and handed Elias a pouch of dried fruit she'd been saving. "Could be raiders," he said. "Could be smugglers. Could be worse." You've seen worse, she asked quietly. He nodded. I used to ride with them, before Sahonia. Her eyes flicked toward the rifle in his hand, then back to his face. Have you ever done things you regret? He didn't hesitate. Every damn day. She adjusted the wrap over Nolly's shoulder. Then maybe this is your chance to make it right. That sat heavy in the air. They didn't run that day. Instead, Elias set traps, reinforced the coop, dug a trench behind the cabin that could be hidden from sight. Maria helped holding tools, steadying boards, and staying silent. By nightfall, they were too tired to eat. As they sat beneath the stars, watching the wind move like ghosts across the desert, Maria whispered, You think peace is earned? Elias leaned his head back against the cabin wall. Maybe. Or maybe it just comes with too high a price. She shifted closer, Nolly asleep in her arms. Then let's pay it. Together. The next morning, the coop door was open. Blood smeared across the ground. Feathers everywhere. All 4 hens are gone. 2 dead, the others taken. Elias Maria called from the porch, panic in her voice. He rushed over. A mark on the doorframe, scratched in with something sharp. Not random. A symbol. One he recognized. El silencio, he muttered, rage blooming in his gut. They're not just passing through. Who are they? Maria asked, clutching Nolly to her chest. A gang. Ride through the territories like they own them. I used to know some of them. Now I'd hoped they were all dead. Why would they come here? Because they can. Because they want what we've got. But we don't have anything. He looked at her. At Nolly. At the patch of garden, the walls, the roof they'd built. We have everything, he said. And that makes us a target. That night, Elias didn't sleep at all. Neither did Maria. They stayed near the fire, whispering plans they hoped they'd never have to use. The rifle sat between them like an unspoken vow. We could leave, Maria said. Hide in the rocks. Go east. Find another place. He shook his head. No. This is home now. We built this. We hold it. She reached over and took his hand. Elias. You don't owe this place your life. He looked at her. No. But maybe I owe it to my fight. At sunrise, they stood side by side at the ridge watching the horizon. A rider appeared. Lone silhouette. Moving slow. Not hiding. Elias lifted the rifle. Heart-steady voice quiet. They found us. Maria didn't flinch. She just said, Then let's show them what we're made of. The rider crested the ridge just after sunrise, backlit by the morning blaze. A lone figure on a dun horse dust, trailing like smoke behind each step. From the porch, Elias stood motionless, rifle across his arms. Maria was behind him, Nolly in one arm, the other wrapped tight around the child's head like a shield. The rider didn't stop. Didn't speed up either. Just approached at a steady, deliberate pace that spoke of confidence or recklessness. Elias narrowed his eyes. Leather vest, wide-brimmed hat, something slung across the saddle. A rifle, maybe. Or worse. He raised the barrel slightly. Maria stepped closer. You know him. He shook his head. Not yet. At 20 yards, the rider reined in. The horse huffed. The dust settled. Then, in a voice roughened by wind and whiskey, the stranger called out, Looking for trouble. Elias didn't lower the rifle. That's what trouble always says, he replied. The man dismounted slowly, hands visible, palms open. My name's Amos, he said. Used to ride with El Silencio. Ain't proud of it. Ain't part of 'em no more. Maria stiffened. You expect us to believe that Elias said stepping off the porch? No. I expect you to listen. 'Cause there's more comin' behind me and they don't knock before takin'. He tossed something into the dirt between them. A badge. Bent, scorched at one edge. The crest of El Silencio carved into it a skull with a thorned crown. I came to warn you, Amos said. You got 2 days. Maybe less. Elias kept the rifle level. Why warn us? Amos met his eyes. Because I've done worse than watch families die, and I can't carry that anymore. A beat passed. The desert held its breath. Then Elias spoke. You ride alone. Amos nodded. You stay alone, I can. Elias studied him. He saw no twitch in the man's stance, no lies leaking from the corners of his eyes. Just fatigue, regret, and a shadow of something else, hope maybe. He lowered the rifle. If you talk fast and work faster, you can stay one night, Elias said. But you pull anything. He cocked the rifle. I won't miss. Amos nodded once. Fair enough. They let him tie his horse to the post and sleep in the old tool shed behind the coop. That night, Elias didn't sleep. Maria didn't either. But Amos did like a man who knew what might be coming and didn't want to waste the hours left. The next morning they planned. Amos stood at the table drawing a rough map in the dust with a knife handle. 5 riders. Maybe 6. 2 with rifles, 1 with dynamite. The rest just mean as hell. Maria looked between them. Why come here? They saw your smoke days ago. Figured if someone's setting up camp out this far, it's either a trap or treasure. Either way, they want it. Elias paced. We have no treasure. You have something they don't, Amos said. Roots, fire, peace. They want to kill that just so they don't have to see it. Maria stood. Then let them see it won't die easily. They looked at her hair pulled back, shirt damp with sweat, nollie wrapped across her chest, and realized she wasn't afraid. Tired, yes. Worn, sure. But she had built this place with bare hands and will alone, and she wasn't letting go. Neither was Elias. They worked like time was bleeding. They set traps along the ridge trail, buried broken glass beneath the sand, and barricaded the windows. Maria filled bottles with oil and rags. Amos reinforced the tool shed as a fallback shelter. Elias dug out old supplies, ammo jerky, cloth whiskey, the last of it. At sunset they shared a meal quietly sparse, a prayer whispered, not spoken. Elias passed Nolly back to Maria, then stood on the porch, eyes cast toward the horizon. If they come at night, he said, we let 'em close. We make it loud, fast, and final. Amos nodded. They won't expect a fight. Elias looked down at his calloused hands, the rifle, the land behind him. This time I ain't running. I'm making my stand where I buried my past. That night, sleep came in shifts. The wind stirred the curtains like ghosts. Coyotes cried in the distance, but no horses. Not yet. Maria lay on the floor near the door, shotgun beside her. Nolly slept, tucked into her chest. Elias sat in the dark, back to the fire, watching, breathing. The relic was still in his pocket, heavy and cold. At dawn, dust rose on the ridge. 6 riders, black coats, red scarves, no banners, just silence. Elias didn't flinch. He stepped outside, rifle at the ready. Maria behind him, Amos at his side. The leader of the gang, a tall man with silver rings on every finger, raised a hand. Well, well. Thought that this was just some old gravesite. Elias spat into the dirt. You thought wrong. The man grinned. We'll take what you've got and burn what's left. Elias aimed down at the site. You can try. They didn't wait. Gunfire cracked like dry wood splitting. The fight had begun. Amos tackled one of the riders near the coop. Maria took down another with one clean shot. Elias moved like a man possessed not with rage but with clarity. Blood hit the dust. The silence shattered. And somewhere in the firestorm, Elias shouted over the roar, "They're not taking one damn thing we've built!" Gunfire split the morning wide open. Elias fired the first shot, sharp, clean, dropping the rider who charged ahead with a rope in one hand and a pistol in the other. The man fell hard, boot catching the stirrup, dragging him in the dust as his horse bolted. Amos was already moving flanking left behind the coop. He fired twice, then disappeared into the trench they'd dug the day before. His aim was precise, calculated. A man who used to kill for the wrong reasons is now doing it for something right. Maria stayed low behind the porch railing. Nolly wrapped tight against her chest. She breathed through her teeth, slow and steady, the shotgun clenched in both hands. The baby whimpered, sensing the chaos, but didn't cry. Smoke thickened in the dry air. The sun hadn't fully risen, but heat shimmered around the cabin, distorting shapes and shadows. One of the riders was tall, wiry. His coat, lined with bones, lobbed a stick of dynamite toward the tool shed. Elias shouted, "Amos, move!" The shed exploded into splinters. The blast knocked Amos into the trench. Dirt rained down. The echo of the blast rolled across the canyon. "They're not taking one damn thing we've built!" Elias roared, stepping into the open, rifle raised. Another rider galloped toward him. Elias didn't flinch. He dropped to one knee, aimed, and fired. The bullet caught the man high in the chest. The rider keeled sideways, crumpling before he hit the ground. Maria fired next. Her shot took out the one circling behind the chicken coop where she knew he'd be. Her instincts were sharp, almost feral. She didn't aim for the center. She aimed for the legs. Let the bastard bleed in the dirt. 3 down, 3 to go. Amos emerged from the trench, blood on his forehead. Not his, he thought. Probably not his. "Elias," he shouted, pointing. "Back right, Rock Ridge, a sniper!" Elias dove behind the water barrel as a shot splintered the porch rail. Maria shielded Nolly, curling around her daughter, her body a wall. "Can't get a clean angle from here," Amos growled. "I'll flank you," Elias called back. "Keep their eyes forward." Amos nodded, popped up, fired 3 rounds toward the ridge. Suppression fire. Old habits. Elias crawled through brush and dirt, circling wide behind the cabin. His boots scraped rocks. Every movement is loud in his ears. His pulse beat so hard he could feel it in his teeth. Then he saw him. The sniper hidden halfway behind a boulder rifle, steady scope glinting. Too focused on the front. Too confident. Elias didn't wait. He raised his revolver and fired once. The bullet struck behind the ear. The man folded like cloth. Back at the cabin, a 4th rider had slipped through. He came in quietly. A knife in one hand, teeth gritted. He kicked in the back door and found Maria holding Nolly, a shotgun aimed at his gut. "Step closer," she said, "and I'll show you what a mother's capable of." The man paused, smirked. She fired. The shot lifted him off his feet and slammed him into the wall. Blood sprayed the wooden panels. Nolly began to cry, finally. The room went still. Maria sank to her knees, holding the baby tight, rocking back and forth as the sound of the outside fight faded into silence. Elias returned to the porch, smoke curling around him, rifle lowered. Amos limped beside him, shoulder grazed, but intact. One rider remained. The leader. He stood in the open, now facing the cabin, coat flapping, pistol dangling from his fingers. He raised his hands. "I ain't here to die," he said. "Too late for that," Elias replied. "You kill me now, more'll come. That's how it works." "You're right," Elias said. "But they'll find your bones in the dust and know we didn't lay down." The man's smile cracked. "You got blood on your hands, Elias," he said. "Always did." Elias stepped forward. "And now I've got something to protect with it." He pulled the trigger. The last rider crumpled into the sand. For a long moment, the desert was still. Only the wind moved, shifting ash feathers, bits of charred wood from the tool shed. Then came the sound of Maria opening the cabin door, Nolly in her arms. She looked at Elias. His shirt torn, dust covering his face, a line of blood along his temple. But his eyes were clear, alive. She walked to him, stood beside him in the aftermath. "You okay?" she asked. "No," he said honestly. "But I'm here." She nodded. "So are we." They stood in silence. Survivors. Not just of this battle, but of the lives that led them here. That night they didn't speak much. They buried the dead far from the garden in the hard ground near the ridge. No markers. No names. Just shallow graves and a prayer whispered through gritted teeth. The coop was in ruins. The tools had gone. But the cabin still stood. The garden still clung to life. And they were still breathing. Later by the fire, Elias held the relic in his hands again. The silver caught the firelight, reflecting not just his face, but Maria's too, and Nolly's dozing quietly in her mother's arms. He turned the metal over, then pressed it into Maria's palm. "What is this?" she asked. "The weight I've carried too long," he said. "And I don't want to anymore." She looked at it, then at him, Elias. "I don't need the past to remind me who I am. I've got this place, I've got you, I've got her. Survival's just the beginning. Now we decide what's worth building." The next morning, Maria opened the front door and gasped. Footprints. Tiny ones. Dozens. The tracks of someone or something had circled the cabin in the night. Elias appeared behind her, rifle in hand again. They weren't alone, he said. And just like that, peace slipped from their fingers once more. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the sand. Dozens of small light, carefully placed, encircled the cabin. Some led toward the coop, others toward the well, but none broke inside the perimeter. Whoever had come, they hadn't attacked. They'd watched, studied, waited. "Elias," she whispered. He stepped up beside her, already scanning the ridgeline, the shadows, the horizon. His rifle hung loosely in his hands, but the tension in his shoulders was iron. "They weren't alone," he muttered. "The ones we killed. They were the opening act." Maria's hands tightened around Nolly, who squirmed sleepily against her chest. The air was dry still and full of the kind of silence that wasn't peace but warning. "They didn't want to fight last night," Elias said. "They wanted to see what we'd do, what we're capable of." Maria looked up at him. "And now they know who." He nodded. "Which means we've got a new problem, one that's watching us breathe." They followed the prints out past the ridge. Elias led rifle up, every step measured. Maria stayed close, Nolly strapped tightly to her back. Amos' arm, still bandaged from the firefight, brought up the rear. His limp had worsened, but he didn't complain, just kept moving. The prince veered into a narrow canyon to the north. The stone there rose sharp and twisted, forming natural walls that swallowed the sun. The path narrowed, then vanished into scrub brush, and loose rock. They found nothing. No campfire, no food scraps, no scent of horses. But the feeling remained something out there was watching. Still. Amos knelt, fingers brushing one of the prints. Kids. Elias blinked. What are light-footed adults? Small boots, soft soles. They moved like hunters, but not pros. Scouts, Maria said. Or survivors, Amos replied. But it doesn't matter which. Not if they come back. Back at the cabin, they reinforced the windows and reset the perimeter traps. The chicken coop, already half collapsed, was dismantled entirely. No more cover for anything or anyone. Amos offered to stay outside, that night rifle in his lap, eyes on the horizon. Maria didn't argue. She could see the guilt crawling behind his eyes since the fight. As if survival itself had become a weight too heavy to carry without penance. Inside, Elias sat on the floor, sharpening his blade with slow, careful strokes. "Do you ever get tired of being ready?" Maria asked, rocking Nali. He didn't look up. "I get tired of needing to be. You think they'll come back? They already have. They're just waiting for the dark." That night, no one slept. The fire was kept low. The baby didn't cry. Even the wind seemed to tread lighter. Around midnight, a rock landed on the porch. Not thrown, placed. Amos reached it first. No note. Just a symbol scratched into the stone, 3 intersecting lines jagged like lightning bolts. Elias stared at it, eyes narrowing. "What does it mean?" Maria asked. "I've seen it before," he said. "Northern tribes, sometimes used by rebel cells, sometimes by outcasts." "Are they trying to send a message?" Amos asked. Elias stood, fists clenched. "Yeah, it means you're in our territory now." Maria's face tightened. "But we've been here longer." "Doesn't matter," he replied. "We claimed a piece of land they were letting die. Now they want to decide if we earned the right to keep it." The next morning they saw smoke on the eastern ridge. A signal fire. Deliberate. Controlled. Not a threat, but a summons. "They want to talk," Elias said. "Or they want to trap us." Amos spit in the dirt. "Only one way to find out." Maria stepped forward. "You're not going alone." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "No. But you and Nali stay here." "No," she said firmly. "You told me once that this was our home. Then we defend it as one." Elias searched her eyes, found nothing but resolve. "Fine," he said. "But we go smart. We leave signs behind. If we don't come back by nightfall, Amos, you take her west." Amos nodded without hesitation. "I mean it," Elias said. "Whatever happens, she and the baby live." Amos met his stare. "You have my word." They walked to the ridge slowly, carefully, Maria with Nali swaddled tight against her back. At the top, 5 figures stood waiting. 3 men, 2 women, all dressed in patchwork gear, fragments of tribal cloth mixed with scavenged soldier armor. None of them carried guns, but each wore a blade. Their faces were weathered, but not cruel. The leader stepped forward. She was tall, broad-shouldered, hair braided with bone beads, a tattoo curling up her neck like smoke. "You the ones who killed Silencio?" she asked. Elias nodded once. "They came for what wasn't theirs." The woman smirked. "Good. That means you're either smart or lucky." "Why are you here?" Maria asked. The woman looked at her, then at the baby. "Because you've built something that can't be ignored." Her voice wasn't mocking. It was curious. Respectful, even. "You dug into the bones of this place," she continued. "Tilled dead land. Killed the wolves. You made something live. Elias tensed. And that bothers you, no, she said. It inspires us. That silenced them all for a beat. We watched, she went on. We sent scouts. We left marks. We waited to see if you'd burn or bloom. Maria stepped forward. And now the woman smiled. Now we want to help. Back at the cabin, Amos saw them coming from the ridge. He didn't raise his gun. Not yet. He watched the strangers walking beside Elias and Maria, not as enemies, but something else. Their posture was relaxed, trusting, or maybe just brave. Inside, Nolly stirred and whimpered. Amos walked to her, knelt beside her crib, and whispered, "Looks like we're not alone anymore, little one." As the sun dipped low and the strangers sat around their fire, Elias passed bread and salted meat across the circle. The woman, her name was Sarah, pulled a folded map from her satchel. "Other outposts are dying," she said. "You've got food, walls, fire. You've got purpose." Elias studied her. And people will come. People who want peace. People who want war. You'll need to choose which you let in. Maria looked down at Nolly. "We didn't come here to start a movement," she said. "We came here to survive." And now Sira said, "You're doing both." Later that night, when the visitors had gone to sleep and only the stars were left awake, Elias whispered to Maria, "They'll come for her one day, won't they? People like her don't stay hidden forever." Maria nodded slowly. "Then we teach her to rise." Elias looked out at the darkness and nodded. "Let the desert know our home will stand." The wind carried change. It whispered through the canyon at dawn, rustling the new fabric on the porch, catching the scent of roasted beans and earth. A breeze like that didn't belong to silence or ruin it, belonged to places where people lived, where life returned. And for the first time in years, Elias woke not to fear, but to motion. Outside, the camp had grown. Sira's people, now calling themselves the Rooted, had returned with more than just stories. They brought seeds, blankets, salvaged tools, and 5 more souls willing to build something real. In less than 2 weeks, the land transformed. Where there had once been barren dirt and rusted traps, now stood garden rows, handmade fences, water collectors catching morning dew. They were building a community. But with growth came exposure. Elias walked the edge of the property every morning before sunrise, rifle slung across his back, not from paranoia, but duty. The past had taught him that anything worth keeping had to be guarded, not just by strength, but by clarity. Maria had grown quieter, not from fear, but from reflection. She'd begun sketching a map of their territory on old scraps of canvas, marking what was fertile, where water flowed, where the soil cracked. Nolly, now toddling, chased chickens around the half-built coop, her laugh a sound so full of life it startled anyone who remembered silence. Still, the days weren't light. Some nights Elias heard voices along the ridges, wandering folk desperate or curious. Once they found an arrow lodged in the garden fence. Not fired in anger, but as a warning. On the 5th day of the new moon, Elias called a meeting. They sat in a wide circle beneath the cottonwoods, voices low, fire crackling in a shallow pit. "We've grown faster than we planned," he began. "That means someone's watching. And if they think we're vulnerable, they'll come. Let them," said a young man named Torin, who recently arrived from the high plains. "We're not weak." "No," Elias said, calm but sharp. "But we're exposed." He looked around the circle. Sira, arms folded, gave a slight nod. Amos sat off to the side, whittling silently. "We need structure," Maria said. "Not just muscle, rules, roles. If we're a people, not just survivors, we need more than a reaction." A silence followed, but it wasn't disagreement. It was the stillness of minds realizing she was right. Survival is instinct, she continued, voice firm. But building a future, that's a decision. That night under the stars, they drafted their first agreement. Nothing grand, just a list scrawled in charcoal on hide: protect the land, share the work, defend the young, respect the old, and never trade peace for power. Elias signed at last, his hand heavy, knowing full well the cost of promises. 2 days later, trouble came riding in under a blue sky. Not an army, just a single man, alone. But he carried himself like he owned every grain of dust he rode across. His clothes were clean, his boots were polished. The horse was too sleek for travel this far out. Elias saw it all from the watchtower they'd built using salvaged timber. One look and he knew this man wasn't here to join. He was here to measure. They met at the edge of the field. The stranger removed his hat. "Morning." Elias didn't return the pleasantry. "You got a name?" he asked. "I do. My name's Calder." "And what do you want?" Calder's smile was all teeth. "Heard you're building something special out here." "A refuge, some say. Others call it a movement." "It's a home," Elias said. "Depends who you ask." Calder dismounted, ran a hand along the fence. "Things about homes, they attract attention, and attention draws interest, and interest has a price." "Are you here to collect?" No, Calder said. "Not yet, but I am here to let you know the world beyond your fence is waking up, and it remembers what happens when someone tries to build peace without permission." Behind Elias, Amos had quietly approached, rifle hanging loose at his side. "Your threats always come dressed like advice?" Amos asked. Calder looked at him, then back to Elias. "No threat," he said. "Just reality. You've built something. That's admirable. But you don't get to stay invisible anymore. There are towns still fighting over dirt tribes reclaiming what was taken, and old powers who don't like competition." He paused, then leaned in slightly. "When the day comes, choose carefully. You're not just protecting yourself now. You're representing something bigger." He mounted his horse again, tipped his hat. "Good luck, Elias. You're gonna need it." And with that, he rode off. That night, the fire burned higher than usual. Not for warmth, but for courage. Elias stood again before the group. "Calder's visit was no accident," he said. "He came to remind us that peace has a price. That the world out there doesn't sleep just because we chose to." No one interrupted. "Some of you came here to start over. Some of you just wanted to live. But now we have something worth defending. And that means choices." He looked at Nali asleep in Maria's arms. "We can shrink back, hide again, or we can rise. A fire like ours doesn't stay small, it spreads. So we better decide what kind of flame we want to be." Silence. Then Sira stood. "If this place falls, let it fall with a fight." Amos nodded. "If they want our peace, let them try earning it." Torin stood. "If they think we're soft, they haven't seen us bleed yet." Maria didn't speak. She simply stood, walked to Elias, and placed her hand in his. The message was clear. They wouldn't run. Days passed. They built higher walls, trained with blades and rifles, and rationed supplies with precision. Then one morning, Nali wandered into the field with something in her tiny hands, a broken badge half buried in the dirt, the same symbol Calder had worn. Elias took it from her gently. "They're closer than we thought," he said, and in his chest a fire caught. Not of fear, but purpose. The wind changed direction again. It no longer whispered. It pushed low, hard, like something was coming behind it. Elias stood at the far end of the field, boots deep in tilled soil, watching the horizon split into waves of heat. The badge Nolly had found sat in his coat pocket, edges sharp, as if it had been broken not by time but by intent. Amos stepped up beside him, hands resting on the butt of his revolver. "Still think we've got time," Elias didn't answer right away. "They're already here," he said finally, "just waiting for us to blink." Behind them, the camp was quiet but alert. Everyone moved with purpose now, less like survivors, more like sentries. Sira had set up 2 posts at the canyon mouths. Maria was organizing rotations to guard the well and food stores. Even the children were given jobs to watch for smoke, watch for signs, and stay near shelter. They were becoming something more than just a community. They were becoming a defense. The second fire appeared at nightfall, just a flicker far to the west, placed deliberately on a high bluff. It didn't move, didn't grow, didn't threaten. It announced. Sira spotted it first from the watchtower. She climbed down, fast boots skipping every 3rd rung. "Same spot they used last spring," she told Elias. "That's not a coincidence." He nodded. "They're signaling Calder." We respond, "No." "Not yet." Maria arrived a moment later, face unreadable. "Do you think they know about the water line, probably?" Elias said. "That's why they haven't attacked. They want to cut us off first." Maria looked toward the fire on the ridge. Her voice dropped low. "Starvation takes longer than bullets, but it kills just the same." They convened a full camp meeting at midnight. Elias stood in the center of the circle, firelight dancing across his face. His eyes were heavy, not from fear, but from the burden of knowing. Calder's not gone. That fire was him or someone close. We won't get a warning. They'll come quiet, maybe in the night, maybe when they think we're asleep. He looked around. We're not a militia. We're not trained. But we've built something that scares men like him. Something that tells the world you can heal without permission. That's why they want it gone. Sira stepped forward. "So we hit first," Elias said. "We survive first. But when they come, we don't retreat. We don't negotiate." Amos lit a cigarette, exhaled slowly. "We bleed, they bleed more." Even the children stayed silent, understanding in their own way. Maria took Elias's hand again just for a second, as if to say, "We're ready even if we're not." The next morning, a rider came. Not Calder, not a soldier. A boy, maybe 16, no weapons. Just dust and a note pinned to his chest with a shard of copper. He stopped just short of the gate. Didn't speak. Just held the message out with shaking hands. Amos stepped forward, took the paper, unpinned it slowly. 3 words scrawled in ink. "Surrender by dusk." Elias looked at the boy. "You believe in their cause?" The boy's lips trembled. "I don't have a cause. They said if I didn't deliver it, they'd cut off my mother's water." Elias stepped forward, placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're safe here." By noon, Elias and Maria stood on the ridgeline again. No fire now, just silence. "Why here?" she asked. "Why do they want this land so badly?" He looked out at the horizon, wind brushing through the brush like it was hiding something beneath. "Because it doesn't belong to anyone," he said. "And that terrifies people like Calder. They don't know what to do with something that can't be bought or broken." Maria nodded. "Then we stay unbroken." They spent the day preparing, not frantically, but deliberately. Quiet strength. Traps were set along the perimeter, simple and deadly. Blind corners now held oil barrels half buried in sand, ready to ignite if needed. Amos stashed rifles in 3 locations, just in case. The children were moved into the root cellar. Everyone else chose their positions. Elias took the west fence. Sierra took the high ridge. Maria stayed near the well, Nolly nestled in the arms of an elderly woman who could still shoot straight when needed. The sun dipped low, casting the whole desert in a gold that felt like an ending. But it wasn't. Not yet. Just after dusk, they came. Not with the thunder of hooves, but the whisper of boots. 6 figures approached from the west, 5 from the south. No banners, no torches. Just knives, rope, and the silence of men who thought they'd already won. But they hadn't counted on a camp that had learned how to breathe through fire. The first trap sprung at the west fence. A tripwire caught one man's ankle, snapping it clean and sending him screaming into the brush. That scream triggered a shotgun blast from Maria's station. 2 men fell in seconds. Chaos followed. Elias opened fire from behind a wagon. He dropped one at 20 yards another as the man reached for a torch. Amos took 2 near the well, one with a bullet, one with a blade. Sierra, perched on the ridge, hit the last man from the southern group with a rifle shot so clean he didn't make a sound. Within 5 minutes, it was over. The dust settled, the air was thick, and the camp still stood. Elias walked the battlefield as the stars blinked open. 11 men, all dead. None were Calder. "He's waiting," Amos said, lighting another cigarette. "Testing our walls, sending fodder. He's measuring how loud we'll shout." Elias replied. Maria walked to him, blood on her boots, not hers. "He thinks we're building a shelter," she said. "But we're building a storm." At sunrise, a scout returned from the northern ridge, breath ragged. "They're coming," he said. "Dozens. Not just Calder's men. Mercs, deserters, hired blades." Elias didn't flinch. He turned toward the center of the camp, where the fire had been relit, and called out, "Everyone gather up. It's time to finish what we started." The sun hadn't risen yet. It crouched behind the hills like the rest of them, waiting for whatever came next. The camp was quiet, not from fear, but from focus. You could hear the breath of the land, the soft clink of metal being checked one last time, and the occasional murmur of hands squeezing hands. Elias stood at the center of the compound, the fire burning low in front of him. Around him were the faces that had built this place, Maria with Nolly held tight against her chest. Amos with his jaw clenched around silence, Sierra leaning against her rifle like it was a spine. Across the fire, the rest of the rooted had gathered. People of all kinds, broken, healed, angry, hopeful. Not warriors, but not victims either. They were something else now, something new. Elias spoke softly, but his voice carried. "We didn't come here to fight," he said. "We came to survive. But we stayed because we saw what survival could grow into roots, community, something worth handing to our children." He looked to Maria, then to the others. "And they hate that. Not because of who we are, but because of what we represent. A place that says you don't need power to have peace. That you don't need a badge or a flag or blood on your hands to have value." He stepped forward. "So when they come, remember this, we're not defending a place. We're defending an idea." No one cheered. No one needed to. The silence between them said everything. They came with the rising light. More than 24 riders, their coats dark with dust and old sins. Mercenaries, deserters, killers. And at the front of them, Calder. He rode slowly as if time obeyed him, as if no one had ever told him no. Behind him were wagons loaded with weapons, smoke bombs, chains. Elias counted 32 men, maybe more, all heavily armed. From the ridge, Sierra gave the signal, 2 sharp whistles. Elias raised his hand. Positions, they moved fast, fluid. Maria disappeared into the east blind with 3 others. Amos dropped into the trench with a scoped rifle. The children and elders were deep in the cellar under heavy lock and heavier prayer. The land was quiet for one final breath. Then Calder raised a fist, and hell followed. Gunfire cracked. Dust exploded in the air. A grenade sent a shockwave through the far fence, splintering wood and sending one of their lookouts flying. But the rooted didn't break. Elias fired from behind the forge, dropping 2 riders clean. Maria laid down covering fire, her rifle emptying in sharp, practiced bursts. Amos took out a man mid-run with a shot that cracked bone and spine. Sierra rolled a flaming bottle from the ridge, sending one wagon up in a bloom of fire. Screams followed. They pushed, hard, but Calder's men pushed harder. Within minutes, 4 rooted were down, 1 dead, 3 wounded. The mercs breached the west wall. Close combat followed. Knives, fists, fire. The air turned thick with sweat and blood. Amos was hit, shoulder torn open by a blade. He kept fighting. Maria ran out of rounds and grabbed a hammer. Elias found Calder in the smoke. They faced each other between the shattered garden beds, where tomato vines still clung to life, unaware of war. Calder smiled. "You built something soft," he said. "I'm here to end the lie." Elias didn't blink. "You think peace is a lie because you've never earned it." They collided. Calder was fast, a trained killer. But Elias had something deeper, rage buried in purpose, grief hardened into clarity. They fought like old enemies, their fists landing with the weight of years. Calder landed a punch that cracked Elias's lip. Elias took it, then drove a knife into Calder's side. Not fatal, just deep enough to change the tide. Calder staggered. "They'll come again, you know. There's always more of me." Elias pressed closer, breath shallow. "Then we'll keep standing. Again and again. Because peace ain't weakness. It's the strongest thing we've got." With that, he drove Calder back into the scorched dirt. Sierra fired the final shot from the ridge clean through Calder's chest. He dropped. No last words. Just silence. The remaining mercs saw their leader fall, and with him the illusion of victory. Some ran, others surrendered. By sundown, it was over. The dead were counted. Buried. Elias sat beside Amos, who was stitched up and sipping whiskey through gritted teeth. "You did good," Amos muttered. "You did better," Elias replied. Maria arrived with Nolly, her face streaked with ash and sweat. Nolly reached for Elias. He took her in his arms and looked around at the camp still standing. Bloodied, cracked, but alive. Sierra leaned against a post, bruised and smiling. "We held," she said. Elias nodded. "No, we grew." In the days that followed, word spread. Other camps sent scouts not with guns, but with seeds. Families began to travel miles to join. Not for safety, but for purpose. The rooted became more than a name. It became a promise. Amos built a schoolhouse from salvaged stone. Maria taught stories under the trees. Sierra trained patrols not to attack, but to protect. And Elias. He watched. He tended the soil. He listened to Nolly laugh in the fields. And sometimes, late at night, he stood by the graves and spoke to them like old friends, promising that their sacrifices had not been in vain. Years passed. The wind still carried dust, but now it carried songs, too, of a place in the desert where peace was more than survival, where families grew not in silence but in strength, where a man named Elias laid down his weapon not in surrender but in triumph. Because in the end, this wasn't a story about war. It was about what comes after. About how something broken can become whole. About how home is not made of wood or stone, but of people who choose to stay, choose to rise. And maybe, just maybe, the most radical thing a person can do in a world built on pain is plant something and protect it with their life.